Thank you very much. I want to thank His Holiness the Pope for his interest in anti-human trafficking and migration, including prostitution and child slavery. I want to thank Monsignor Surondo for inviting me to this august body, including the Pontifical Academy of Science, for the invitation to come to Rome to be able to participate in this all-human trafficking conference. As we can see, human trafficking and organized crime, they're not new phenomena, but they have developed over the years and increased to alarming proportions. Sierra Leone is a developing country in West Africa, which I should add had gone through a 10-year civil war and an additional 2 years of the Ebola virus. And we, as members of the international body, have enacted several local legislations in line with international conventions. I would mention here that the international conventions are not adopted straight into local law. They are domesticated in parliament and then passed into law to fit our own circumstances. So as my colleague from Botswana was saying yesterday, I don't know if the word is filtered down, but there are some amendments to fit our own situation. So in that case, we have enacted the Anti-Human Trafficking Act of 2005, the Child Rights Act 2007, which is mainly in line with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but with a difference into the Sierra Leone circumstance, Domestic Violence Act 2007, in line with CEDAW, but with a difference, Sexual Offenses Act 2012, and the Anti-Money Laundering and Financing of Terrorism Act 2012. We also passed another legislation, which was the registration of marriages, which we never had before. So in this situation now, customary marriages are being registered in Sierra Leone. Trafficking of persons, including children, is not novel, and there are very many cases, but very few reports and very few convictions. As we can see, that has been the trend in several countries, including ours. Sierra Leone has a thriving fishing industry, and it has been used as a transit point to North Africa and the Middle East. The Human Trafficking Act has enacted a task force which is mandated to ensuring that human trafficking is combated. It's a body that is full of several ministers, the Minister of Local Government, the Minister of Social Welfare, the Attorney General, Education, Information, Health, Foreign Minister. All of them form part of this task force. But of interest is the second section, which deals with the offense of human trafficking. And that can be done in one of those several ways, either by recruiting, transporting, transfer, harboring, or by the threat or use of force, or other forms of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power, or position of vulnerability. So in all of these situations, you can see that the victim becomes helpless and the victim is falling right into the hands of the perpetrator in these circumstances. By subsection 3, what is exploitation? And that includes keeping a person in a state of slavery, of subjecting them to slavery practices, sexual servitude, illicit removal of human organs, and exploitation during armed conflicts. Now, from this definition, we can see that most of the domestic work that has been discussed here, women being used for domestic services, domestic servants, is covered. We have also included armed conflicts because of the 10-year civil war that we had. And you would all recall that we still have the Special Court for Sierra Leone, which is an hybrid court. And as at now, we have the residual Special Court for Sierra Leone. And there is a lot of jurisprudence in relation to sex slaves, child soldiers, rape, used as crimes against humanity. The residual Special Court is still functioning, and I happen to be one of the judges in that residual court. From that list, you can see that the offense of human trafficking and, of course, the exploitation is very exhaustive. It's very, very exhaustive. It deals with the prosecution of the offenders, and the court has jurisdiction to try persons who are Sierra Leoneans in any part of the world. The crime can be committed wholly or partly in Sierra Leone by a person on board a vessel or aircraft. So again, vessel is included there mainly because Sierra Leone is a fishing state with a lot of resource in fishery. We have the consent factor, which is a determinant factor. And we also have, by Section 15, the process for extradition in case you need to extradite a person. Now, the issue most international bodies have complained about is the penalty. The penalty is 50 million leones, or a term of 10 years, or both. Now, 50 million leones is very minimal. It's an equivalent to about $6,500 or so. It's not much. And the imprisonment for a term of 10 years, or both. But we also have the issue which has been discussed here before, restitution or forfeiture under Section 23 and Section 24 of the Act. And it gives all how a victim can be put back into restitution: transportation, income, legal fees, psychological treatment, therapy, rehabilitation, emotional distress. All of this can come under that arm. It has been argued that the sentence of 10 years is not commensurate with our offense of rape, which is life imprisonment. But indeed, that is the law, and probably the 2005 legislation needs to be revisited. And considering that the Sexual Offences Act was in a more recent one enacted in 2012. There are fewer prosecutions in human trafficking than in other offenses, like offenses against the person, offenses against property, or sexual offense. This is because there are very few reports of human trafficking. We do have more reports on sexual offenses because we do have in police stations what we call the FSU unit in each police station now, which is a family support unit, where sexual or domestic offenses have been reported. But there's no such unit to deal with human trafficking. And the non-reporting of these offenses is due to several factors. Firstly, there is unawareness of the offense, as we have all agreed here for the past 2 days. There is need for more education and outreach through NGOs, the press, and the penalty, the nature and penalty these offenses carry. There's also the need for parents and guardians who have been wrongly informed by traffickers that these children will get a better life and a brighter future once they leave Sierra Leone, which is not the case. So education for the parents and guardians. They need to know that these are all false promises. And this should apply both across the board to men and women who have been trafficked. And once they leave the jurisdiction, they will not accomplish their hopes and dreams. So they end up in drugs, prostitution, and they use as sex slaves. We also have the Child Rights Act, which has protected children from exploitation, torture, and degrading treatment. This includes depriving the child of its health, education, development, and corporal punishment. Many children do forced labor because of their economic status as they come from poor families. And they're exploited. They're used as words, especially when they come from extended families. They do migrate from the rural to the urban areas to find better education. The minimum age for betrothal or marriage is now 18 years, though we know as a fact that very many girls are being married below that age, and there's no prosecution on that because the parents do consent and they don't complain about it. Under the CRC, it provides for the standard type of work that children can do. They should not do work below the age of 18 if it is hazardous, including going to sea, mining, or manufacturing. But we know that that happens every day. The children are being taken off below the age of 18. We have about 40 Sierra Leonean women on their way now from Kuwait and Lebanon, and 9 are being subjected to forced labor who are forced into forced labor in Kuwait have been repatriated. The other women will soon be repatriated now. We wonder where trafficking commences. It's agreed that it commences in the migration from rural to the urban areas, and they are used and trafficked into the cities and out of the cities under the pretext of doing domestic work for their bosses or the masters. Trafficking has occurred in occurs for several reasons, including sexual exploitation, prostitution, marriage, labor, domestic, mining, fishing, vending, agriculture, begging, and petty crimes. These causes vary, and they could be caused for economic cause, which is poverty, material aspiration, political, which is legal factors, war, corruption, porous borders, cultural factors, nomadic migration, child labor, early marriage, social condition, limited education, violence in the home, individual characteristics like rebellion and peers. And we have still not ratified the 2000 UN TIP protocol. Now, to combat it, we need to strengthen, amend the laws, train law enforcement, more social outreach programs, and the judiciary has been blamed for not having many convictions. But as we all are aware here, the role of the judiciary is not investigative. It is to adjudicate on the evidence that is before it. And it should adjudicate in the interest of justice. When there's no or paltry evidence in respect of a crime like trafficking, the courts would have no option but to acquit, as the burden of proof is high and it lies on the prosecution, which is beyond reasonable doubt. Sometimes the witnesses don't come at all. So there is the need for, as I said before, for education, campaign, social awareness, NGOs, for them to be strengthened to improve. I want to just mention that my view is that human trafficking is also connected with transnational crimes and connected with money laundering and connected also with rape and other crimes against humanity. And we have the Anti-Money Laundering Act and the act relating to terrorism, and in which you can see that human trafficking is also part of the legislation which was passed in 2012. And the penalty is 15 years or 30 million leones for a corporate body. Very recently, just the boat, the Ezadin boat, which sailed from Sierra Leone to Italy, it landed in Italy and it was impounded. And it was a boat to carry livestock, but in it was found 62 children. And the boat was intercepted, and the flag has been taken away from that particular vessel, and its license has been terminated because it carried the flag of convenience, which we do carry in Sierra Leone. Thank you very much for your attention.